my colleagues Anna Botting in Tel Aviv and Mark Austin, who will be joining us from Beirut. Well, today, this country relived the fear and terror of a year ago when Hamas militants broke through the border fence, killing and kidnapping hundreds of Israelis. The commemorations were somber. They began at the site of the Nova Music Festival, where I was today. Thousands were partying there when Hamas attacked. Today, displayed in those fields were the faces of the 364 people who died on that fateful day. Well, Israel's response to those attacks has been relentless. More than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza and 90,000 others have been left injured. The bombardment of Lebanon is now destabilizing the entire region. And still, the world waits for possible action against Iran. Well, tonight, with Anna Botting, as I said, in Tel Aviv, and Mark Austin in Beirut, I'll look back at 12 months that have reshaped this region. Let's begin with our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle's report on how Israel marked 1 year of war.
The anniversary of Israel's darkest day began with the sounds of the war that has haunted this region ever since. Thousands gathered at first light at the site of the Nova Music Festival, the scene of the biggest massacre that morning. 364 people were murdered here and 40 taken hostage. Some had tried to hide in the trees, others jumped in their cars to escape, a few even played dead and prayed for help to arrive. But it was Hamas which came from three sides. The blood of their victims is now seeped into the very sand on which they had danced all night. What does today mean to you?
Today is, I think, the day that changed for every Israel, everyone in Israel, all the lives.
Probably the toughest year we've ever had. A massacre that nobody could ever think of. And a total collapse of what we thought was very safe.
Israel's president came to console the relatives of the dead.
This is a scar on humanity. This is a scar on the face of the earth. We have to do whatever we can in all ways and means possible to bring back our hostages while theirs in the tunnels and dungeons of Gaza.
The IDF released new video showing the battle to retake Raim, the kibbutz next to the Nova Festival. The fight took many hours. During that day, Hamas fired more than 4,000 missiles into Israel. Today, only a handful were launched, although some directed at Tel Aviv. In the war that has followed, the IDF has destroyed Hamas's ability to attack Israel in the same way again. But they have also destroyed much of Gaza. The pain of loss and the trauma of war isn't felt by Israel alone.
The October 7th massacre was the most horrific attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. But unlike the Holocaust, we rose up against our enemies and fought back. We are changing the security reality in our region for the sake of our children, for the sake of our future, to ensure that what happened on October 7th will not happen again. Never again.
Israel is a country united in grief, but divided over the course of the war. Thousands started their day outside Benjamin Netanyahu's home in Jerusalem, angry that 97 hostages remain in Gaza and no ceasefire has been agreed to free them. Tonight in Tel Aviv's Yarkon Park, hostage families and relatives of the dead held a ceremony of music and readings to mark the day. 40,000 were expected to attend, but in the end only a few thousand could. Much of Israel is still under restrictions because of threats of missile attacks from Yemen, Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Another reminder that 12 months on, the fighting has only spread, and there is no sign of peace in sight. October the 7th will forever be part of Israel's history, But how it will change the country's future is still a question yet to be resolved.
And we'll be speaking to Ali in a moment. But as we've been reporting, 250 people were taken into Gaza on that day. We understand some 97 remain in Gaza and are waiting for some kind of ceasefire deal for them to return to their loved ones. I just want to show you the faces of those who still haven't returned home. And as I said today, while I was at the Nova Music Festival, so many family members were grieving as they talked about waiting to hear more about those who they believe might still be alive in Gaza. Now, the youngest is not yet 2 years old. He was taken when he was just 10 months old, and the oldest is 86. Now, a year on, as we said, their families are still desperately waiting for news of their loved ones. Well, let's bring in Ali, who joins me here now. And Ali, I mean, it was an incredibly somber day. While you and I stood there at the site of the Nova Music Festival, we could hear people grieving, mothers wailing, and also the sound of artillery fire. I mean, it was quite eerie to be there.
It was. Today was an anniversary, and anniversaries are moments to look back. And today was an anniversary to remember what happened 12 months ago. Today was an anniversary to grieve the loss of life on that day. But who 12 months ago, regardless of what happened that day, would have predicted that 12 months on, the country and the region would be in the situation it is in now? And that is why today was not just an anniversary looking backwards. There was definitely an element of the here, the now, and the looking forwards. This is a war in Gaza that is ongoing, a war in Gaza that has claimed tens of thousands of lives. But there is also now another war in southern Lebanon. There are new fronts opening up. Israel is operating and fighting on multiple fronts, and nobody knows where it's going to go. Nobody can confidently predict where we'll be in another 12 months. I don't see this ending anytime soon. I do not see a ceasefire in Gaza, a ceasefire in Lebanon, or peace in the region happening anytime now. And so I think that is why it is a daunting prospect for Israelis, for Palestinians, for Lebanese, and for everyone in the Middle East.
Yeah, as you say, an incredibly dangerous moment for everyone in this region. As the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says they're fighting on 7 fronts. Ali, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Well, as we've been reporting, the situation here where so many families are grieving, and of course the ongoing conflict and devastation for the Palestinian people. But as Ali was saying, this conflict has now spilt over to other parts of this region and of course to the situation in Lebanon. Well, let's get more now from my colleague Mark Austin, who joins us from Beirut. Mark, over to you.
Yalda, thank you very much indeed, and good evening from Beirut. This country is now the focal point of the conflict, which is dragging the Middle East closer than ever to an all-out war. The Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah has been firing rockets from southern Lebanon into northern Israel since Hamas's attack this time last year. But no one could really have predicted Israel's response. Pagers and walkie-talkies exploding, a relentless bombing campaign on its neighbour's capital here, and now Israeli troops on the ground inside Lebanon. Our international correspondent John Sparks reports now on another 24 hours of bombardment.
As the suburbs of the Lebanese capital are pounded by the Israelis, new parts of the country are coming under attack. Other targets, other fronts in a fast expanding war. This apartment block in the hills above Beirut was slammed by an Israeli missile strike, and nobody seems to know why. These men are now looking for a new place to live.
They just bomb. They bomb indiscriminately. It's not like anybody's hiding out here.
He was living next to a family who'd been displaced by the war. this spot serving as their refuge. Yet all 6 were killed in the strike. The leftovers of their final meal remain on the table. A search and rescue team turned up to look for 2 missing children, but they didn't have the equipment to lift the concrete slabs.
They're in the building. It's structurally unsound, but they've been going through each floor, each room, and they're up at the top at the moment. We can hear them.
In Gaza, the war and its consequences continue 1 year on. They bombed the house. It fell on top of our heads, says this man, who was picked up by an ambulance after a strike in Jabalia. It's a refugee camp in Gaza, now surrounded by tanks. The Israelis are intensifying their operations. Bodies pulled from the attack were sent to the hospital in a cart, but there was nothing the doctors could do. It's the 12th member of my family to die. Why, God? Why are they doing this to us? He says. Vowing to continue a long war of attrition, Hamas fired a volley of rockets at Tel Aviv. The attack causing some shock, but little damage. In Lebanon, Hezbollah attacked Haifa, a port city in the north, as the Israelis launched a massive response, 100 aircraft targeting 120 sites in the space of an hour. 1 year of fighting could well bleed into 2 and draw additional parties to this fight. It is a reality the region knows only too well.
And John is here with me now, and more attacks here in the city promised tonight by the Israelis. So, I mean, no sign of a let-up.
Mark, I mean, we have seen the southern suburbs of this city, the southern suburbs right over our shoulders, getting pounded over the last couple of days. But we've also seen multiple strikes now landing around Beirut, to the north, to the south, in the mountains to the east. And that's where we were today, a community called Kumatea. We saw one of several bomb sites there. The interesting thing for me is that this is a mixed community, Christian, Druze, Shia and Sunni Muslims as well. And the people that we spoke to there today had absolutely no idea why their community had been struck. The people in that apartment block were absolutely puzzled. They couldn't understand it. I think also important to say that the people in that apartment block, which consisted of residents and also internally displaced people, they're now looking for another place to live, as are the people in the surrounding buildings, because they don't feel safe there anymore. Once again, you've got this nation on the move, put on the road essentially by this Israeli bombing campaign.
And I mean, these warnings to clear these areas, sometimes they come very late, don't they?
They come very late. We've seen that certainly in Beirut. They're also extensive. I mean, the Israelis are serving, in effect, evacuation orders for more than 100 communities, for villages and towns in southern Lebanon. And tonight, they've issued another evacuation order for the coast from the border, the Lebanese border, Israel-Lebanon border, right up to the Awali River. That's 60 kilometers north. That is a huge tract of land. Yeah. And, you know, that is fueling concerns that the Israelis are trying to empty out southern Lebanon, perhaps before a fully fledged invasion. That is the concern here.
Yeah, OK. John, thanks very much indeed. So, Yalda, definite concerns here about what the next stage could be, what the next few days could hold, and, of course, what it all could mean for the region. Yalda.
Mark, thank you so much. And we're just hearing in the last few minutes our colleague Anna Botting, who is in Tel Aviv. We understand there are sirens blaring over Tel Aviv at the moment. Earlier today, we knew that there were rockets that were being fired from Gaza, and people were forced into their shelters in Tel Aviv. But we will hopefully be able to speak to Anna in a moment and find out what's going on there. But just the reality of the situation now here on the ground. As Mark was saying, there's been 2 weeks of nearly constant shelling in Lebanon. 2,000 people have been killed as a result of the fighting. over 1 million people have been left displaced in Lebanon in the space of just a couple of weeks. And then, of course, a year of bombardment in Gaza. Communities have been flattened, and the entire Gaza Strip, when we look at those images, appears to have been devastated and under the rubble. Our colleague Tom Cheshire has been investigating. Have a look.
Before the war, Khaloud and Shahed, twin sisters, lived in the north of Gaza, and they would spend their evenings planning their futures, imagining the lives they might lead. This is now the place they must call home. Like many teenagers, they used to spend time with friends and families, documenting their nights out on their phones. This is footage of their home from before. It's too dangerous to access now. But we can paint a picture based on satellite analysis of the destruction of what it's like now. The sisters fled Gaza City on foot, eventually arriving in the southern city of Khan Yunis, along with hundreds of thousands of other displaced Palestinians.
It's extremely difficult to see how the city is being completely destroyed. Nothing remains. No schools, no hospitals, no universities, and no mosques.
Due to limited access to Gaza, we have to use satellite imagery to gain an idea of the situation on the ground and to measure the destruction. This is Shahed and Khaloud's old neighbourhood, including the seaside cafe they showed our team on their phones. And this is after. All but a few buildings razed to the ground. And you can see in this map the scale of the damage across Gaza. It shows all the areas that have been hit, buildings, farms, everything in between. But it is the simplest statistic that tells the story of this conflict best. More than 40,000 people have died, according to the Hamas-run Ministry of Health. They do not say what proportion of that are Hamas fighters. Israel says they account for nearly half of the total. But around 13,700 were men and more than 6,000 women. And then more than 11,000 children and nearly 3,000 elderly. For those who have avoided death, their lives have still changed immeasurably. Munir still has his wife and his 5 children.
They had a normal life like any kids, going to school, coming home to rest, and then picking up their football to play in the street or at the club.
Every evening, they'd go to the highest point in Gaza City for a coffee and to see friends. They last visited the cafe the night of October the 6th. This is what that journey up the hill would look like now, again based on satellite analysis of the damage. Today, the family live in a tent in Deir al-Balah. Aid agencies agree on what constitutes the fundamentals of life: food, healthcare, living conditions. And on every count, Gaza is a disaster. The Al-Zag's family's new neighbourhood is in the Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone. Previously home to just a few thousand people, now it has a population density greater than Manhattan and central London. Shortages have led to a doubling of food prices since the war began, and the cost of flour and meat has tripled. All the while, infectious diseases have soared to more than 1.5 million cases, including acute respiratory disease, diarrhea, scabies and jaundice.
If I were to imagine a nightmare, it wouldn't come close to the current situation we're living in these days.
In the great reckoning of this conflict still ongoing, some things can be counted. Some cannot. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
So many lives turned upside down as a result of this conflict for Palestinians, for Israelis, and now for the people of Lebanon. And let's just go through some of the numbers to give you a sense of just how deadly this past year has been. Now, on the day of the attacks here a year ago, 1,200 people were killed in Israel. The Lebanese government says that more than 2,000 of its citizens have been killed, most of them since Israel stepped up attacks in the past few weeks. And Hezbollah rocket attacks continue. 28 Israelis were killed in the latest figures to the middle of September. Meanwhile, more than 700 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank and over 6,000 have been injured. As of today, the Gaza Health Ministry says that nearly 42,000 Palestinians have been killed since October the 7th. And more than 97,000 have been injured. For many of those who survived, the war's legacy has been life-changing, as our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports.
The search for food and medicines gets harder by the day in Gaza. So many mothers trying so hard for their children. Her whole family was wounded when a bomb landed near their tent, but her baby Jihad was by far the worst hurt. The attack has left him with devastating injuries. Both his legs were blown off. Doctors couldn't save 3 of his fingers. He's frustrated and in pain. He asked me for slippers to wear today, his mother says. He can't comprehend he has no feet. It's so painful for her too. She's desperate to get him out, but the specialised care he so clearly needs is out of reach to Gaza, with little arriving and no one getting out right now. Some aid is being flown in, but this isn't going to Gaza. We joined a rare Emirati flight taking supplies and personnel to a floating hospital off the coast of Egypt. The ship's been converted into a state-of-the-art medical facility. But the war's never far away, even in safety. She's just learnt her son, who wasn't allowed to leave with her, has been killed. Most of her family are still trapped there. Sometimes escape is no escape at all. At one stage, the doctors here were doing 15 surgeries a day, mending broken bodies crushed by falling buildings or torn apart by bombs. Yazan is one of thousands of Gaza children, now amputees. He's only 10, but was medevaced out of Gaza on his own. He's now alone here, away from his entire family. I play football and planes, all the games like the other boys. He's trying to be upbeat, but his face tells a different story. Here he's made to feel special, the hospital's little star, who's come through so much on his own and still has a very long road to go. Minal told us she was bombed whilst at the only bakery. She waited 3 months to leave Gaza to get treatment for her broken hip. I've just heard about another massacre, she tells us. For 7 hours I couldn't get through because the phone lines were cut. Now I've heard 70 people were killed. I just want to join them. A nurse tries to console her, but there's no comforting this amount of trauma and grief. For babies like Rakan, who do make it out of Gaza, he's safe in the Emirates now, there are years of pain ahead. His childhood will be filled with surgeries to fit different prostheses, and he's one of the lucky ones. Most of his family was killed or injured, but only he was allowed to leave for treatment, with his grandmother as guardian. Tragedy is in no short supply here. 13-year-old Tuka had both legs blown off. Let's go, without me, the physio tells her. She's struggling with 2 artificial limbs. I want to walk properly, she says, and go back home. Returning to Gaza is the dream, but one that's unlikely to be realised anytime soon. A year of the most devastating war has left a terrible legacy, and it's still going on. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
Thousands of civilians permanently scarred as a result of this year-long war. Well, let's go straight now to my colleague Anna, who joins us from Tel Aviv. And Anna, I know that you're there for the memorials that are being held, but I know also that the sirens could be heard over Tel Aviv just in the last few minutes.
Yes, indeed, and several interceptions not far from us, in fact, above our head. 7 were counted, the IDF suggesting this evening that they were fired from the direction of Lebanon. That is the 3rd time today, certainly, that we've been affected by sirens. The first one this morning actually landed, or one of them did, in a Tel Aviv suburb of Holon, causing damage there. And then earlier this afternoon, a ballistic missile, a surface-to-surface missile, was fired by the Houthis and was taken out high in the atmosphere by the Israelis. So that was being fired from Yemen, a surface-to-surface missile. So three times that Tel Aviv has been targeted today, of all days, October the 7th, of course. Well, I want to take you back now to last October to remind you how events unfolded during the Hamas attack. On that morning last year, Israel was caught off guard by a barrage of more than 4,300 rockets in 20 minutes, the largest in its history. During the wave of missiles, Israel noticed a breach at their border with Gaza at Kisufim outpost as members of Hamas began to stream in, and then another, this time by boat, at Zikim beach. It was the first of more than 60 breaches. The IDF claim up to 6,000 Hamas members entered Israel. Once inside, Hamas carried out a number of coordinated attacks, killing civilians. Well, the largest attack came at the Nova Music Festival, where 364 people were killed and at least 40 hostages taken. Armed men surrounded the grounds and began open firing on the attendees. Anyone found taking refuge was also killed. Well, the armed groups attacked a number of kibbutz, some shown here. At least 130 were killed in Be'eri alone, and another 17 at a different small trance festival. And in the cities of Hakim and Sderot, armed groups stormed in, killing police officers and civilians. Israel briefly lost control of both places, Hamas killing at least 47 in Hakim and 70 in Sderot. The attacks, widespread and diverse, some of the worst that Israel has ever seen. Some of those who survived have been reliving that day.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. I remember every detail. It doesn't leave me. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
Kfar Aza, a kibbutz only 3 kilometers from the Gaza border, was one of the first reached by Hamas on that Saturday morning. Residents hid in their shelters, unsure what was happening outside.
We didn't know anything. We didn't have light. We didn't have water.
It was a hard day. Sad day.
It seemed like the end of the world. My house was shaking from all the rockets that were coming out of Gaza. That's how close it is. And in a WhatsApp group, somebody wrote that they can hear shooting. That was the Hamas terrorists killing people already. And then we heard the shooting coming closer and closer to the house, and then they shot the house. And then we heard them walking inside the house next to the door of the little shelter. You could hear the steps, and they were shouting and screaming in Arabic. And they started shooting around us. There must have been something like 15 terrorists, some of them with knives, some of them with guns, and they shot us inside the house.
It was 12 hours before the Israeli military arrived. It then took them days to retake the kibbutz. Finally, on Tuesday morning, after 3.5 days of fighting, the longest battle was over. 64 Israelis had been killed. Aviv Baram died defending the kibbutz.
After he has been injured, he called Kheli and said, Kheli, I'm injured. And she asked him if he can move a bit. And he moved close to the big olive tree. And that's where we found him, where the army found him. And the last time that he wrote for Heli that, I love you all.
"18 residents had also been taken hostage by Hamas. Some dead, some alive. They were forced into Gaza.
They pushed us and Keith fell and they broke his ribs and they shot us and one of the bullets hit Keith's hand. I remember going through the Michol, that's the big, huge fence. It was just open and we just drove into Gaza.
Kfar Aza today is a ghost village. A few people have returned, if their houses are still standing.
Why did you choose to move back?
I didn't see any other option except to live in my house, my land. It's what I owe to this country, what I owe to my father. This is the education that I got. You never leave the house, you never leave the land. So we came back.
Massive weekly protests have been held across Israel, demanding a ceasefire and a hostage deal. It hasn't happened. 97 of the hostages taken on October the 7th are still being held in Gaza. Aviva Siegel was released last November. Her husband, Keith, wasn't.
I bent down to him and said that he said that I'm going to Israel and that he must be strong for me and I'll be strong for him. And that's how we separated. He didn't say a word. He was in a shock. I was in a shock. I didn't believe. I don't know what Keith thought. I've got no idea what Keith thought. And he managed that moment.
He said nothing.
He said nothing.
October the 7th changed everything. For millions, it was the day normal life paused. A year on, the war in Gaza continues and conflict has spread across the region. More than 42,000 have been killed in Gaza. But Hamas remains undefeated. Benjamin Netanyahu promised Israelis total victory over their enemies. It is unclear when or how that will come.
Well, after Hamas fighters tore through the kibbutz communities surrounding Gaza, hundreds of people died. I travelled to kibbutz Nirim, just a mile from the border, to hear the story of one family's fight for survival to protect their newborn baby as they had to choose between revealing themselves to Hamas or dying from smoke inhalation in their safe room. Baby Kai is one of the youngest survivors of October the 7th. Now aged 1, he was just 10 days old when the siren sounded at 6:30 a.m. Within 15 seconds, the family, Amy and Uriel, grandmother Deborah and baby Kai were in their safe room, the attack underway.
Non-stop rockets, automatic gunfire.
The family's house, seen at the start of this video, released by Hamas. Deborah whispers a voice message to her other daughter, Corinne.
Corinne, they're in our house. If you can imagine, Hamas terrorists on one side of the door and Amy and Uriel on the other side. There's just a still door. And I was on the floor with the baby, with Kai, and I had my finger in his mouth trying to keep him quiet. We had no water, no bottles. We had nothing.
At 8:55 a.m., Deborah texts, "They are in our house, and our house is on fire." 3 minutes later, full of smoke, "We are going to die."
The fire consumed my dog. He screamed and screamed and screamed until he died, which was something I shall never forget.
At 9:44, they take this picture inside the safe room. Photographs on the wall barely visible. Baby Kai is struggling to breathe.
He had soot, black soot, just coming out his mouth, his nose. So I was on the phone with the firefighter. I mean, amazing man. He was with us for 3 hours and gave us hope that someone was coming. Told us if we can, open the window, even if it's a smidge, and let Kai breathe.
A tiny baby, an inch of air, a future to fight for. Looking at pictures of your house, burnt out, blackened, your belongings entirely destroyed. How did you survive?
Don't know.
No idea.
Don't know. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how we survived. I sent messages saying goodbye to people.
Mama, I'll help you get out.
Their escape came after 8 hours. Taken first to a bomb shelter, then on to hospital. 1 year of war, 1 year of life. A baby that gave a family hope to survive their darkest day. So the city of Tel Aviv once again hearing sirens. It's happened all day. The first lot this morning fired from Gaza, the second a ballistic missile fired from Yemen, and the third lot this evening that we have just had to take shelter for, fired, we understand, from Lebanon. So that does mean that on October the 7th, this important anniversary for the Israelis, Hamas, the Houthis and Hezbollah are all showing that they have the capability to fire into this major city. Let's show you that moment. That's the sirens. Let's go. We've got to take cover. Get under the thing, get under the thing. Lebanon firing back then towards Tel Aviv. We know that Beirut, the southern suburbs, have once again been put on alert that there will be airstrikes tonight. Let's go back to Mark then in Beirut.
Yes, Anna, thanks very much. And Hezbollah, of course, threatened just such an attack today. Well, as you saw in Anna's report, caught up in this conflict are, as always, the children, many of whom are witnessing the kind of trauma that will haunt them for years. Here in Lebanon, as the conflict intensifies, so does the humanitarian crisis. More than 1 million people have now been displaced, and the UN says that most of, well, in fact, all of Lebanon's 900 shelters are now full. I visited one of the shelters in Beirut where efforts are being made to soften the effects of these bombs on Lebanon's young.
Night after night, the bombs targeting Hezbollah are falling here. It is loud, it is destructive, and it is terrifying. There is the damage you can see, but then away from the smouldering ruins, there is the damage you can't. Noor is 13. Her street was hit, her family trapped in the frantic panic to escape the area. And Fadel is just 10. He too has seen things no child should ever see. Both are now relatively safe in a shelter in Beirut and telling their stories to counsellors.
She's saying that there was so much bombing in the area around them. They had to flee Burj al Barajne, and there was so much traffic because everyone left in the same time. He was there when the strike happened, and he was terrified, so they were running out of the building and trying to find a place that has no buildings so that the buildings don't fall over their heads.
Denise Nima and her team do their best to heal young minds scarred by bad things. They dance and they play, but everywhere in these shelters you see children who do not take part, who are withdrawn, and who will need special help to deal with this.
have a huge number of children that are fleeing from different parts of the country, arriving to Beirut, who are extremely traumatized. Children are seeing planes overhead and are putting their hands over their heads because they think that they're going to be bombed by those planes.
It is why Denise pays close attention to Noor and Fadel. Just two of the children here who will need long-term psychological support.
The problem is huge. This is considered one of the most catastrophic humanitarian emergencies the country is facing.
In war, it is always the same. Innocent lives torn asunder before they've barely begun.
So, Yalda, once again, this city is bracing itself for another night of airstrikes. The Israelis say, of course, that they're precise and targeted. But I think there is going to be a growing concern about the nature, the intensity of this bombing campaign on a city like this, such a densely packed, built-up city like this. Yalda, back to you.
Mark, thank you so much from Beirut. Well, as we've been reporting across Israel, there have been memorial services to mark that October 7 day, which has really changed the shape of this country. And the US President Joe Biden lit a candle in Washington to mark what he described as a dark day for the region. The US President, of course, has also come under criticism for his failure to prevent a wider regional war that could drag the US into it as well. Well, let's go straight to our Mark Stone, who joins us live now from Washington. And Mark, I mean, this year marks obviously what Israel went through, their pain and agony, the tragedy that the Palestinians have suffered over the course of the last year. We've seen the way it has spilt over to other parts of this region, especially Lebanon, over the course of the last 2 weeks. I mean, this isn't just about October 7. This is also about Joe Biden and his failed legacy to try and bring about some kind of ceasefire and to ensure that this doesn't spill over, which it now has.
Yeah, it's about America. It's about America's place in the world. It's about America's ability to influence the world. And I think we've seen over the course of the past year that the Biden administration, that Joe Biden, has really genuinely struggled to mould this conflict, to stitch up something that has unravelled so quickly. He's threaded a needle today, I think, because he, as everyone else, I think would have wanted to stop and reflect on that moment alone, a moment which by now he would have hoped a full stop had been put at the end. But of course it hasn't. So while he is reflecting on that moment, on October the 7th, a year on, he is also pondering what comes next. He is doing, and I know his teams, they tell us they are doing all they can with diplomats around the world to try and mould the next moves, whatever they may be. But the course of the past year has suggested that American influence is deeply limited.
Mark, thank you so much for that update there from Washington. So that was the view there from Washington. Let's get more now from the UK Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. I spoke to him a little earlier about October 7 and his thoughts on it. Just have a listen. OK, we don't actually have David Lammy, but of course we want to show you this particular video. I will be bringing you that interview with David Lammy in a moment, but I want to show you these images. You can see No, I'm told we don't have the video, but can we please have our guests come into position now so that we can... No, I'm told we have David Lammy. Let's go to the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who spoke to me a little earlier. Have a listen.
Well, I begin by reflecting on the many hostages that are still held in Gaza. I am thinking of their loved ones. I'm particularly thinking of Emily Damari, the British hostage, and her family. And my heart bleeds for them a year later. And of course, I'm reflected on a year of war in which thousands of people have lost their lives, and the inability to reach a hostage deal and a ceasefire and bring this crisis to an end.
Foreign Secretary, why do you think there is an inability? I mean, we've seen Joe Biden propose various different deals with the help of the Egyptians and the Qataris a number of times. The US president has said that Prime Minister Netanyahu, frankly, has been a roadblock a number of times to a number of ceasefire deals that have been put on the table.
Well, look, I am grateful to the work that the United States has done to try and get this deal over the line. And of course, I have been in almost weekly contact with Tony Blinken, particularly in relation to that, but also the work of Egypt and Qatar to do their best to get this deal over the line. I do accept what the United States says, which is that 90% of the deal is there. All issues in the end come back to the security guarantees that I think that Israel understandably wants in order to withdraw from Gaza, but also the deals that are necessary to ensure that Hamas are not continuing to run Gaza. Diplomacy continues and must continue. And as I always say, diplomacy fails until it works.
Mr. Lamy, I spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu's top advisor, who described the licence suspension by the UK, by you, as shameful. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself said that it was shameful, especially on the day when they had 6 hostages and their bodies returned here to Israel. On the other side, human rights organisations have said that, frankly, it was just symbolic. It's not going to actually make a difference on the ground. So was this just symbolic? Because on the one hand, there are those who are saying it wasn't going far enough, it's not going to make a difference. On the other hand, it's angered many here in Israel because when the going got tough, they feel that the UK turned on them.
Look, in a grown-up world, this is a crisis in which it's impossible to please everyone all of the time. That is just the truth of it. Margaret Thatcher's government imposed serious restrictions on arms sales to Israel. David Cameron's government imposed restrictions on arms sales to Israel. Gordon Brown's government imposed restrictions on arms sales to Israel. And it's because we have the most robust export licensing regime that I reached the decision I did in relation to arms sales that could be used in Gaza particularly, and suspended those arms. And I stand by those decisions, which were not political decisions. They were quasi-legal decisions based on whether there was an assessment under criteria 2C of our export licensing regime and whether there was a clear risk that Israel could be in breach of international humanitarian law. And I stand by that quasi-legal judgment.
And you felt that you feel that risk was there?
Yes, I made an assessment on the basis of the advice that I received and the assessments that I had to look through, that particularly in relation to humanitarian access and aid, which the UK government have been raising now for months and months and months. And of course, the last estimates were that 60 trucks were getting in a day. And we acted with colleagues in the UN to stop polio spreading to young people, that situation is particularly stark, and also in relation to the treatment of detainees. And I make that with no, this is not with any joy. It's with tremendous regret, but we made that assessment on the basis of the clear legal advice.
That was the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy speaking to me a little earlier. Well, today we're at the Nova Music Festival, where 364 people were killed. It is considered the deadliest music festival in history. 3,000 people had gathered there to listen to music, to party and to dance. Hamas tore through that area and killed those 364 people, and they took 40 at least 40 hostages back with them. The ceremony today was somber. It was a moment to remember those who had died and remember those who were still hostages in Gaza. Now, let's speak to the parents of one young British-Israeli soldier who was off duty at the Nova Music Festival. His name is Anna Shapiro, and he was there, and he showed remarkable heroism. Thank you both, Moshe and Shira, for joining us here on the programme. He wasn't there as a soldier. He was just there to be part of the party.
Yes, he came with sandals and a T-shirt, and he came to join the party of peace and happiness. And eventually it ended in a big slaughter and a massacre that occurred there. Yeah.
As our small daughter said, and then came the terrorists and they ruined the party.
What did Anna do? Because he showed remarkable heroism in that moment as well.
He went with his three friends out of the party area because he understood he had to go out. It's very dangerous to stay there. And he came to a little shelter that was on the way on the road. When he came in, the shelter was almost full of people. It had 24 people inside. It's a very, very small shelter. And immediately he understood that he had to take a stand. He had to take responsibility, and he had to calm everyone down because everyone was in a panic, of course. And he said, I will take care. You can count on me. I will stand in the front of the shelter. And if the terrorists come and tackle us or throw grenades inside, I will handle it. I will take the grenades and throw it out. And if I'm wounded or I cannot continue anymore, then you should continue after me, because he understood what he's doing. And then it happened. The first grenade came inside, and he took it, and he threw it back. And another one, and another one. 9 grenades were thrown inside, and he managed to throw it back. And at the end, they shot...
Launched an RPG.
RPG.
We have to understand that it was, there were 20 terrorists. It was unarmed, with bare hands, stood at the entrance. 20 terrorists with RPG missiles, machine guns, grenades, and they shot hundreds of bullets towards the shelter. They didn't succeed in hitting him. With the grenades, they didn't succeed. But in the third RPG that they launched, there was a big explosion inside, and he got killed, and his best friend lost his hand, his Goldberg.
He had only his spirit, his belief in humankind, his belief in making things better, his good spirit and his responsibility. Sandals and T-shirt, that's it.
We have about a minute left on the programme, but how would you like him to be remembered?
Not only as a brave person that he was, but also as a musician, as an artist, as a human being who believes in goodness, in peace, in love, and acting for what he believes in.
If I can add something, that in a clash between cruelty and evil, and dignity and humanity, there is a chance to succeed. He didn't succeed in saving his life, but he succeeded very well in saving others' lives. And we have to know that we should not give up. And if there is any chance, so what's asked for a human being is to stand in the side of humanity instead against evil. And this is what he did. He died for that, and this is his legacy.
Moshe, Shira, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Well, you can hear the pain and the grief in the voices of these parents who have lost their son. He showed remarkable heroism on that day. So many other grieving parents today at the Nova Music Festival and at other memorials across this country. And of course, grieving parents and families in Gaza as well tonight. We will continue our coverage throughout the week from here in Jerusalem. But for now, good night.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.